Hello YouTube! Underachiever here, bringing you another Star Wars discussion video. This time around, I want to bring up a common misconception about Star Wars, the idea that lightsabers can cut through everything effortlessly. Now, it's no question where this idea comes from. We see lightsabers slice through all sorts of things throughout the movies. Obi-Wan cutting off a guy's arm, Darth Vader slashing through pipes and columns, Jedi chopping apart droids, the list goes on. The movies make it pretty clear just how deadly and effective these weapons are. However, there are occasional exceptions to this. And no, I'm not just talking about lightsaber-resistant weapons like vibro-swords and electro-stabs. I'm talking about standard everyday things in the Star Wars universe that lightsabers fail to cut through with ease. The most notable example of this comes from Empire Strikes Back. During Luke's duel with Darth Vader, there's a moment towards the end of the battle where Luke ducks under one of Vader's swings, then uses the opening to strike the Dark Lord's shoulder. Had Luke been facing anyone not wearing armor, he would have dealt the fatal blow right then and there. Instead, it merely glanced off of Vader's shoulder, cutting slightly but not crippling the Sith Lord. This moment was mirrored in the Season 2 premiere of Star Wars Rebels, where Kanan was dueling with the Dark Lord. This time round, it was Vader who delivered the potentially deadly strike, and the Jedi who was saved by the armor he wears. Admittedly, these examples I just mentioned both involved armor, so it's possible that the armor was designed with stopping lightsabers in mind, much like electrostabs. However, these examples are far from the only ones that come to mind. In The Phantom Menace, for example, there's a moment early on where Qui-Gon Jinn is struggling to cut through the doors on a Trade Federation ship. Even before the blast doors are closed, Qui-Gon is having to cut his way through very slowly and deliberately, rather than doing it with a couple simple strokes of his lightsaber. Once the blast door does close, Jinn gives up cutting altogether, and instead simply tries to melt his way through the door. The best example of lightsabers failing to cut through things that I can recall comes from Return of the Jedi. When Luke loses his cool against Darth Vader and starts swinging around wildly, his lightsaber strikes several walkways, consoles, and other surfaces in the Emperor's throne room. Each time it kicks up sparks and damages whatever Luke hits, but his swings fail to actually cut through anything. Toward the very end of that duel, Luke starts chopping at Vader while the Dark Lord sidesteps his attacks, causing Luke's strikes to hit the railing of a walkway. However, each time his lightsaber merely bounces off, as if he were hitting the railings with a solid object rather than a beam of plasma. This carries on until the very last strike, where he puts all of his strength behind a blow that cuts through Vader's arm and the railing both. Now, most of these examples can be easily explained out of universe. Luke didn't kill Vader in Empire Strikes Back because Luke had to lose for obvious story-based purposes. The cut to the shoulder was mostly to give the audience hope that Luke actually had a chance of winning. A similar thing happened in Rebels. Kanan couldn't win against Darth Vader, but since it was only the first episode of Season 2, they also couldn't kill Kanan off. So instead, they had Vader hit Kanan's shoulder armor to show just how big of a gap there was between the Jedi and Sith. As for when Luke was cutting wildly in Return of the Jedi, odds are the special effects budget simply couldn't afford to show Luke slicing apart every little thing in the Emperor's throne room. After all, this was the 1980s, and Star Wars, while still big, didn't quite have the effects budget it has these days. Qui-Gon Jinn during The Phantom Menace couldn't just cut through the blast doors like it was nothing, because then he would have been able to easily take care of the Viceroy, and the movie would have ended way too soon. Even though we know the real-world reasons why these scenes play out the way they do, I still enjoy to think of the in-universe implications. From what we've seen, it appears that the tougher materials in the Star Wars universe, usually some form of sturdy metal, require a good deal of strength behind the swing of a lightsaber for them to be cut. It's not much of an issue for Force users who can cut through weaker things like organic beings and simple battle droids. But when it comes to something more durable like a blast door or body armor, lightsabers can simply glance off if they don't have a fair amount of momentum behind them. So the next time someone asks you if a lightsaber can cut through adamantium or Captain America's shield, I think the answer should be fairly obvious. Now the real question is, if lightsabers cut through by burning or melting things, why does swinging one harder cut through things better? And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed what you just saw, please leave a like and comment below. And if you want, feel free to leave suggestions for future topics as well. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you, always.